The frozen key bit into Rebecca Mitchell's palm like a blade made of winter itself. She stood knee-deep in Colorado snow, staring at what looked less like shelter and more like a tomb someone had carved into the mountainside and then forgotten. The concrete entrance jutted from the hillside, half buried in white, silent as death. December 19th, 2025, 3:47 in the afternoon, and she was about to discover if this was the worst decision she'd ever made or the only one that could save them. Wind howled through the mountains, slicing through her Carhartt jacket, 10 years old, bought at a pawn shop in better times like the fabric was nothing but tissue paper. Her fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago. Breath came in short white clouds that vanished into the gray sky. The key, the single piece of metal that represented everything she had left in this world, trembled in her frost-bitten hand. Behind her, pressed against the rusted hood of their 23-year-old Honda Civic, 7-year-old Chloe watched with eyes too knowing for someone who still left cookies out for Santa Claus. Those eyes had witnessed things lately. Too many mornings waking in parking lots where they pretended the back seat was an adventure. Too many dawns when frost formed on the inside of the windows, and Mama's face tried to hide the fear that lived there now, permanent as a scar. 3 weeks earlier, at 2 in the morning, Rebecca had been someone different. She'd had $800 to her name, the last of everything, and a phone at 4% battery, its screen glowing in the darkness of a Walmart parking lot where they'd been sleeping for 6 weeks. The job at Davidson's Auto in Denver was 3 months gone. 9 years she'd worked there ever since Chloe was born. One of only 2 women on a crew of 11, and she'd been good at her job. Better than most of the men, though they'd never admitted it. She could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone, rebuild a transmission, in her sleep had a reputation for fixing what everyone else declared unfixable. Then Davidson sold the shop. The new owner brought in his own crew, let her go on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 weeks severance and a handshake that felt like a slap. She'd tried everywhere after that, every shop, every dealership, every quick lube place that would let her fill out an application. But winter was slow season. Everyone was cutting back, not hiring. And the applications that asked about gaps in employment, about references, about why she'd left her last job, those applications went into a pile that never got called back. The rent came due, then past due. Then the eviction notice slipped under her door like a death sentence printed on cheap paper. She'd sold everything that wasn't nailed down. The TV, her tools, God selling her tools, had hurt worse than anything. Those had been her father's, the only inheritance she'd received when he died at 52 from a heart attack while rebuilding a Chevy engine. He'd taught her everything, taught her from age 12 how to listen to what machines were saying, how to understand systems meant you understood the world. Now the tools were gone, traded for $200 to cash that lasted maybe 10 days. Chloe's bike went next. The furniture. They packed what was left into garbage bags and the Civic's trunk, and Rebecca told her daughter they were going on an adventure, drove to the Walmart parking lot on the edge of town and parked between a camper van and a semi-truck, hoping to disappear into the background of people who also had nowhere else to go. That was 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks of rotating between parking lots, moving before security noticed. 6 weeks of truck stop bathrooms and fast food sinks. 6 weeks of Chloe doing homework by dome light, asking when they were going home. 6 weeks of Rebecca lying through her teeth, saying everything would be okay, saying Mama had a plan. She didn't have a plan. She had $800, a car with a check engine light that had been on for 3 months, and a daughter who was starting to realize that other kids didn't sleep in back seats. It was December 19th, 6 days before Christmas. The temperature had dropped into the teens, and even with the engine running and the heat blasting cold, seeped in through every gap in the Civic's weather stripping. Chloe had started coughing 2 days ago. Nothing serious yet, but Rebecca knew how fast these things could turn. A cold became bronchitis. Bronchitis became pneumonia. Pneumonia became a hospital visit they couldn't afford, and questions from social workers that Rebecca couldn't answer without risking losing Chloe entirely. That's when she'd found the listing. 2 in the morning, Chloe asleep in the back under every jacket and blanket they owned. Rebecca sat in the driver's seat, phone at 4% battery, scrolling through rental listings she couldn't afford. A glitch in the website redirected her to an auction page. Government surplus and foreclosed properties. Most of it was junk. Abandoned lots in the middle of nowhere. Burned-out buildings condemned by the county. But one listing caught her eye. Underground property. Former Cold War-era storage facility. 40 acres remote mountain location. As is where is. Starting bid $500. Auction ends in 6 hours. She clicked through the grainy photos. A concrete entrance set into a hillside. Heavy steel door. No interior shots. The description was almost suspiciously sparse. Property located in rural Teller County, Colorado. Structure built in 1972. Utilities unknown. Access road unpaved. Buyer responsible for all inspection and occupancy determinations. No warranty expressed or implied. It looked like a doomsday prepper's wet dream, or a hole in the ground where dreams went to die. Rebecca stared at the screen. Her rational mind screamed that this was insane. She didn't know anything about the property, except that it existed and no one else wanted it. Could be flooded, could be collapsed, could be contaminated with God knows what from whatever they'd stored there during the Cold War, could be absolutely worthless. But it was shelter. And shelter was something they didn't have. She watched the auction countdown tick down. 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours. No one else was bidding. At 2 hours remaining, she placed a bid. $500. Her hand shook as she hit confirm. The site refreshed. She was the high bidder. The minutes crawled by. She kept refreshing, expecting someone to outbid her. Some logical person who had done their research and knew something she didn't. But no one came. At 17 minutes before the auction closed, she increased her bid to $750. It felt like throwing her life savings off a cliff, but at least it was a choice. At least it was something. When the auction closed at 6:43 in the morning, she owned an underground bunker in the mountains. Chloe woke up an hour later, coughing into her sleeve. Her cheeks were flushed, and she felt warm to the touch. Rebecca kissed her forehead and tasted salt and fear. "Mama, are we going somewhere today?" Rebecca swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby, we're going to our new home." The drive took 4 hours. Interstate 70 west toward the mountains, then off onto Highway 24, then onto county roads that got narrower and less maintained with every turn. The Civic struggled on the incline's engine, whining transmission slipping in that way that made Rebecca's mechanic instincts scream. They passed through a town called Cristola, population 900, where Rebecca stopped at a gas station and bought crackers, peanut butter, and 2 bottles of water with the last of her cash, except for the $50 she was saving for emergencies. The woman at the counter was weathered and gray-haired, maybe 68, with eyes that had seen enough to make judgments quickly. She looked at Chloe with something like pity. "You folks passing through," Rebecca tried to sound confident. "Moving here," the woman raised an eyebrow. "Into town or just outside?" "Just outside." "Well," the woman handed back her change. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere. Hope you brought warm clothes." She slipped extra granola bars into the bag. When she thought Rebecca wasn't looking, winked at Chloe. It was the first genuine kindness they'd received in weeks, and Rebecca had to blink hard to keep tears from forming. The property management company's office was a single-wide trailer at the edge of town. A man named Frank Calloway, maybe 60, with a belly that pushed against his flannel shirt, handed her a manila envelope containing a deed, a survey map, and 2 keys on a ring. "You're the one who bought the bunker." Not quite a question. Rebecca nodded. He looked at Chloe, then back at Rebecca. "You know what you're getting into out there. I'll figure it out. Property's been sitting empty since 2018. Previous owner died. Estate sold it off. It's about 19 miles up Forest Service Road 81. 4-wheel drive recommended." He nodded toward the Civic, visible through the trailer's window. "But you might make it in that. The bunker itself, I've never been inside. Exterior door was locked when we listed it. Whatever's in there, it's yours now, good or bad." Rebecca took the envelope. The keys were heavy, industrial, cold to the touch. "How do I know which key is which? Big ones for the exterior door, small ones supposed to be for the interior, but I can't confirm that. Like I said, we never got in." He paused, studying her face with an expression that might have been concern. "Listen, miss, I don't know your story, and it's not my business, but it's supposed to snow tonight. If you're planning on staying out there, make sure you've got supplies. Cell service is spotty at best. Nearest neighbor is probably 12 miles. You break down or get stuck, it could be days before someone finds you." "We'll be fine." Rebecca hoped that saying it out loud would make it true. The road to the property wasn't really a road. It was 2 ruts cut through pine trees overgrown with weeds and saplings barely wide enough for the Civic. Branches scraped against the doors with sounds like fingernails on metal. The car bottomed out on rocks and frozen mud, the undercarriage scraping in ways that made Rebecca wince. Her years as a mechanic had taught her every sound a car could make, and these sounds were all bad. Chloe sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit, the only toy they'd kept, through all the selling and downsizing, watching the forest close in around them. "Is it going to be scary, Mama?" "No, sweetheart. It's going to be an adventure, like camping." "Exactly like camping, but underground, like a hobbit house." Chloe smiled at that. She'd read The Hobbit twice, loved the idea of hidden homes carved into hillsides. "Do you think there will be a round door?" "Maybe. We'll see." The GPS on her phone died 2 miles in. Signal lost. She followed the hand-drawn survey map from the envelope, a photocopied thing that looked like it had been reproduced a dozen times. The landmarks matched well enough. A split pine tree, a creek crossing, a boulder shaped vaguely like a sitting bear. After 40 minutes of crawling forward at 5 miles per hour, the trees opened into a clearing. Rebecca stopped the car. Her hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. There it was. The bunker entrance rose from the hillside like a concrete scar on the landscape. The structure was maybe 20 feet wide, 12 feet tall, with a single massive steel door set into the center. Snow had drifted against the base in waves of white. Ice hung from the edges where water had seeped and frozen, creating jagged teeth that caught the weak winter sunlight. The whole thing looked Soviet utilitarian, built to withstand the end of the world, or at least to hide from it. "Wow," Chloe breathed. "It's really underground." "Yeah, baby." "How far down does it go?" Rebecca looked at the deed. The property description said nothing about depth. "I don't know." They sat there for a long moment, engine idling, heat blowing, both of them staring at what Rebecca had bought with nearly everything they had left. It looked abandoned. It looked forgotten. It looked like the kind of place where people disappeared and were never heard from again. But it also looked like shelter. Rebecca turned off the engine. The silence that followed was total. No traffic, no voices, no city hum, just wind through pine trees and the tick of the cooling engine. "Okay," she took a breath. "Let's see what we've got." The snow was deeper than it looked. Rebecca broke trail toward the entrance, Chloe following in her footsteps like she'd learned to do over the past 6 weeks. The clearing was maybe half an acre ringed by dense forest. The survey map showed the 40 acres extended in every direction from this point, but she couldn't see where their property ended and the national forest began. It all looked the same, white and cold and indifferent. The steel door was massive, 7 feet tall, 4 feet wide, with hinges the size of Rebecca's forearm. Rust streaked the surface in orange and brown rivers, decades of oxidation creating abstract patterns. A keyhole sat at chest height, surrounded by what looked like a locking mechanism designed to seal out nuclear fallout. The kind of engineering that spoke to paranoia or prudence depending on your perspective. Rebecca pulled out the larger key. Her hands were shaking from cold or fear or both. She couldn't tell any more. The key slid into the lock, but didn't turn. She tried again, applying more pressure. Nothing. She wiggled it, pulled it out, examined the lock for ice or debris, tried again. On the 4th attempt, something clicked deep inside the mechanism. She turned the key clockwise, and with a sound like grinding metal and escaping air, the lock disengaged. The door shifted inward an inch. "You did it, Mama!" Chloe's cheer echoed off the concrete and out into the clearing. Rebecca grabbed the handle and pulled. The door was heavy, easily 200 pounds of steel, but it swung open on hinges that groaned like they hadn't moved in years. The sound bounced off the walls and carried into the forest. Cold air rushed out from the darkness beyond, carrying the smell of concrete and metal and something else. Something stale, but not rotten, like an attic sealed for decades. Rebecca clicked on her phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a space beyond the door. Not a room exactly, but a chamber. Concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceiling, and at the far end, maybe 20 feet away, another door. This one was smaller, more normal-sized, with a simple handle and the second keyhole. "Stay close." She took Chloe's hand. They stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, their breath fogging in the flashlight beam. The chamber was empty except for debris. A broken chair with 3 legs, some cable spools stacked in a corner, a torn tarp covering something Rebecca couldn't identify. The walls were marked with stains and cracks, but the structure seemed solid. No water pooling on the floor, no obvious collapse or structural damage. Rebecca approached the inner door and inserted the smaller key. It turned smoothly and the door opened into complete darkness. She swept the flashlight left and right, up and down, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. A hallway, concrete walls lined with conduit and pipes, doors branching off to either side, and at the end, a stairwell leading down. "It's huge," Chloe's whisper echoed in the space. Rebecca's heart pounded against her ribs. This wasn't just a bunker. This was a facility, the kind of place that had been built with purpose and money, the kind of place that had been meant to last. "Okay," her voice steadier than she felt. "Let's see what we bought." They moved forward together, flashlight beam dancing ahead of them. The first door on the right opened into a room maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. Empty, the next door the same. But the third door revealed something different. Bunk beds, metal frames built into the wall, 4 of them stacked too high. Thin mattresses still in place, wrapped in plastic that had yellowed with age. A footlocker at the end of each bed, the kind Rebecca recognized from military surplus stores. "This is where people slept." She ran her hand along one of the metal frames. "Can I pick which one is mine?" Chloe was already moving toward the beds, eyes bright with something Rebecca hadn't seen in weeks. Excitement, maybe even joy. She let her daughter explore while she checked the other rooms. A bathroom with 3 sinks, 3 toilet stalls, and 3 shower stalls. All dry, but the fixtures looked intact. A kitchen area with industrial sinks, a massive refrigerator that hummed faintly when she opened it. Still powered somehow, though empty, and cabinets filled with dishes and utensils. A common room with tables and chairs, a corkboard on the wall, still pinned with faded safety notices, and a calendar from 1998. Everything was covered in dust, but nothing was destroyed. It was like whoever had been here had simply walked away and locked the door behind them, expecting to return, and finding they never did. Rebecca found Chloe back in the bunk room, sitting on one of the lower beds, with her stuffed rabbit beside her. The mattress crinkled under her weight, the plastic wrapping stiff from years of storage. "Mama, I think I like this one." Rebecca sat down next to her daughter. The mattress was firm, but not terrible. She looked around at the concrete walls, the dim space lit only by her phone's failing flashlight, the cold air that smelled like decades of stillness. This was their home now, this underground tomb in the middle of nowhere, this bunker built to survive the end of the world, this desperate, impossible gamble that had cost them almost everything. Chloe leaned against her, warm and small and trusting. "Is this really ours?" Rebecca wrapped her arm around her daughter and held her close. "Yeah, baby, this is really ours." Outside, the wind howled. Snow began to fall, thick and heavy, covering their footprints, covering the car, covering any trace that they had ever existed anywhere else. Inside, in the darkness of the bunker, Rebecca Mitchell made a decision. They would make this work. They had to, because there was no going back now, no other options, no safety net, just a steel door, a concrete shelter, and a mother's desperate hope that she had made the right choice. She stood and took Chloe's hand. "Come on, let's explore the rest." They found the stairs and descended into the darkness, the beam of Rebecca's dying phone cutting through shadows that had waited years to be disturbed. The stairwell went down one level, then another, deeper into the mountain. Each level opened into more hallways, more rooms, more mysteries. Rebecca counted as they went. Level 1, the living quarters they'd just explored. Level 2, storage rooms filled with empty shelves, a mechanical space with pipes and valves she'd need to study later, what looked like a medical bay with examination tables still bolted to the floor. Level 3 they glimpsed, but didn't fully explore, the flashlight battery warning blinking red. They returned to the bunk room on Level 1. Rebecca laid out every blanket and jacket they owned on one of the lower bunks. Chloe climbed in, clutching her rabbit eyes, already heavy. The adrenaline of arrival was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion from the drive, from the past 6 weeks, from everything. "Mama, are we safe here?" Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Yeah, baby, we're safe." She hoped it was true. Chloe's breathing evened out within minutes, sleep taking her quickly. Rebecca lay down beside her, but didn't close her eyes. She listened to the silence. It wasn't the silence she'd grown used to in parking lots, broken by passing cars and distant sirens. This was total, absolute, the kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums and made you hyper-aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat. The bunker was enormous, far bigger than she'd imagined from the sparse auction listing. After their initial exploration, Rebecca estimated they'd only seen maybe a quarter of it. 3 levels that she'd found so far, each one branching into hallways and rooms that seemed to go on forever. The whole structure had been carved into the mountain itself, reinforced with concrete and steel that looked built to outlast civilization. By the weak light of her phone now, at 11% battery, she sketched a rough map on the back of the property deed. Level 1 living quarters, kitchen, bathroom, common areas, offices. Level 2 storage rooms, mechanical spaces, that medical bay. Level 3 she'd need to explore more thoroughly when she had better light, but she'd glimpsed what looked like more doors, more hallways extending into darkness. When dawn came, though they couldn't see it from underground, Rebecca got up and began the work of making this place livable. Chloe woke slowly, disoriented, asking where they were before memory caught up with her. Rebecca kissed her forehead and promised pancakes for breakfast, then had to explain they didn't have pancakes, but they had peanut butter crackers, which was almost the same thing. Almost. The kitchen became Rebecca's first project. She found the main electrical panel in a utility closet off the common room. The breakers were all switched off, but when she examined the system, her mechanic's eye recognized quality engineering. This wasn't some jerry-rigged setup. This was professional-grade infrastructure, overbuilt and redundant. Someone had designed this place to run for years without maintenance. She traced the conduit through the walls, following the power lines down to level 2. In a separate room, marked with a faded sign reading "Generator," she found a massive diesel unit, the kind that could power a small hospital. Industrial-grade Caterpillar generator, probably 500 kilowatts. The fuel tank read 3/4 full. Rebecca walked around it slowly, assessing with the trained eye of someone who'd spent 15 years diagnosing engines. She checked the oil, still golden, not black, examined the belts and hoses, aged but not cracked. The air filter was surprisingly clean. Someone had maintained this, maintained it well. She took a deep breath and hit the start button, not really expecting anything. The generator coughed once, twice, then roared to life with a sound that echoed through the entire facility like a sleeping giant awakening. Chloe came running from wherever she'd been exploring, eyes wide. "Mama, what is that?" "That baby is electricity." "You fixed it!" Rebecca grinned through the diesel fumes. "It wasn't really broken, just sleeping." With power restored, the bunker transformed. Lights flickered on in the hallways, revealing decades of dust, but also the true scope of what they now owned. The refrigerator in the kitchen hummed back to life. The heating system kicked on with a groan of old ductwork, and within an hour the ambient temperature had risen from the low 40s to a comfortable 68 degrees. Rebecca found the water system next. The facility had its own well drilled deep into the mountain aquifer with filtration and storage tanks that held thousands of gallons. The pumps activated automatically when she restored power. She turned on a faucet in the kitchen, and after a minute of sputtering and brown water, it ran clear and cold. She let it run for 5 minutes, then filled a glass and tasted it. Clean, better than anything they'd yet gotten from gas station bathrooms. That night, for the first time in 6 weeks, Chloe took a hot shower. Rebecca stood outside the bathroom door, listening to her daughter sing some song from school, and had to press her hand against the concrete wall to steady herself. They had running water, they had heat, they had electricity, they had shelter. Compared to sleeping in the Civic, it was a palace. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca threw herself into making the bunker habitable. She cleaned everything with bleach and soap. She found in a storage closet industrial supplies left behind, still sealed in their containers. She washed the mattresses and bedding in the industrial sinks, hung them to dry in the common room where air circulated. She organized the kitchen, taking inventory of what they had. Dozens of canned goods left behind, most expired, but still sealed. Rice, pasta, even coffee vacuum-sealed in a canister that hissed when she opened it. She tested every light switch, every outlet, every system she could find. Her years as a mechanic had taught her how to read systems, how machines talk to each other, how to trace problems to their source. And this bunker, for all its age and abandonment, had been built by people who understood reliability. Chloe helped in her own way, sweeping floors with a broom she'd found, organizing the common room, creating a corner with the few toys and books they'd brought, making it feel like home. She never complained about the concrete walls, or the lack of windows, or the fact that her Christmas wish list, which she'd written out carefully in November, would probably go unfulfilled this year. She just adapted the way children do, turning the bunker into an adventure rather than a prison. It was on the 4th day, December 23rd, that Chloe made the discovery. Rebecca was in the mechanical room on level 2, trying to figure out why one section of the heating system wouldn't activate when Chloe's voice echoed down the stairwell. "Mama, Mama, come quick!" Rebecca's heart jumped. She dropped her wrench and ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Chloe hurt, Chloe trapped, Chloe lost in the maze of hallways. But when she found her daughter, Chloe was standing in front of a door on level 3, perfectly fine, just excited. "Look!" The door was different from the others. Heavier, steel reinforced with what looked like blast shielding. And instead of a regular lock, it had a digital keypad mounted at shoulder height, its screen glowing a dull red with a single word displayed: "Locked." "What's in there?" Chloe pointed at the stenciled warning on the door. "What does that say?" Rebecca read the faded yellow paint. "Authorized access only. Security level required. Asset storage." "What's asset storage?" "I don't know, baby." "Can we open it?" Rebecca examined the keypad. It was sophisticated, probably biometric at one time, though the fingerprint scanner looked disabled. Now it just required a code, 6 digits based on the display. Not without the code. "Maybe there's a key somewhere, like in the movies, a secret key hidden in a book or under a rock." Rebecca smiled, despite herself. "Maybe, baby, but right now we need to focus on getting ready for Christmas, okay? We'll worry about mystery doors later." "Okay." But the door nagged at her. That night, after Chloe was asleep, Rebecca returned to level 3 and stood in front of it studying the keypad, the reinforced frame, the warning stenciled on the steel. Asset storage. What kind of assets required this level of security in an abandoned Cold War bunker? She began searching in earnest the next day, Christmas Eve. While Chloe made decorations from scraps of paper and tinfoil they'd found in the offices, Rebecca went through every file cabinet, every desk drawer, every box she could find. Most of the documents were mundane. Maintenance schedules, supply orders, shift logs from decades ago. But slowly a picture began to emerge. The facility had been built in 1972 by the Department of Defense as a communications relay station and emergency operations center. It had operated under various names and functions through the 80s and into the 90s. Then in 1996, ownership had transferred not to another government agency, but to a private entity, a shell corporation called Winter Vault Holdings, LLC. Rebecca found the transfer documents in a filing cabinet in what must have been the facility director's office. The sale price was $1 symbolic, but the terms were extensive. Pages of legal language that Rebecca couldn't fully parse, but which seemed to grant the buyer complete control and secrecy. The facility was decommissioned from government use, but maintained at the buyer's expense for private preservation and asset management purposes. She found maintenance logs going back 20 years. Someone had been coming here regularly at least once a month, sometimes more, checking systems, running tests, recording readings. The logs were meticulous, almost obsessive, and they were all signed with the same initials, VB. The last entry was dated July 14, 2018. After that, nothing. Rebecca's hands trembled as she turned the pages. This place hadn't been abandoned by accident. Someone had been taking care of it, maintaining it, keeping it operational for decades, and then suddenly they'd stopped. She was about to close the logbook when something caught her eye. A name on one of the earlier entries, not just initials. A full signature from 1997, when the logs had first started, Victor Bellamy. Rebecca pulled out her phone, now kept permanently at low battery, to conserve power, and typed the name into Google. The page loaded in painful increments, each piece of information appearing like puzzle pieces falling into place. Victor Bellamy, tech entrepreneur, founded Bellamy Technologies in 1983, sold to IBM in 1999 for $1.3 billion, known as reclusive billionaire who dropped out of public life in the early 2000s, eccentric according to sources, paranoid according to others, obsessed with economic collapse and societal breakdown, built multiple preservation facilities around the country, locations unknown. Died August 9th, 2018, at age 71. No surviving family. Estate liquidated. Most assets sold off or donated. August 2018, just weeks after that final maintenance log entry. Rebecca sat back in the chair, her mind racing. Bellamy had owned this place, had maintained it for over 20 years, had built it into something more than a Cold War relic, and when he died, it had simply been forgotten, lost in the shuffle of estate sales and legal proceedings, listed as unremarkable property and auctioned off for pennies on the dollar to a desperate woman who didn't know what she was buying. But what had he been preserving Christmas morning arrived without sunlight. Chloe woke early, trying to hide her disappointment behind a brave smile that broke Rebecca's heart into smaller pieces than she knew existed. They ate oatmeal from packets Rebecca had found in the kitchen stores, the kind with artificial maple flavor that tasted like sweetened cardboard. Chloe opened her one gift, a stuffed reindeer Rebecca had bought at the Cristola gas station with her last $5 wrapped in newspaper because that's all they had. I love him. I'm going to name him Comet. That's a perfect name. They spent the morning decorating. Chloe had made paper snowflakes and hung them from ceiling pipes with thread scavenged from the medical bay. She'd colored pictures of Christmas trees and taped them to concrete walls. The makeshift wreath from pine branches she'd gathered outside before the heavy snow trapped them inside, hung crooked on the common room wall. The space looked almost festive in a post-apocalyptic sort of way. After lunch, more canned soup this time, chicken noodle, Chloe played with Comet while Rebecca returned to her research. She'd found more files, more logs, more pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together yet. Bellamy had purchased this facility specifically for its isolation and structural integrity. He'd upgraded everything systematically over the years, turned it into something private, something secret, something that required digital keypads and blast-reinforced doors. But the answer to why lived behind that locked door on level 3. And Rebecca still didn't have the code. She went through every document again, looking for patterns. Employee IDs, dates, serial numbers. Nothing fit the 6-digit requirement. She tried obvious combinations in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. Combinations of Bellamy's birthday based on what she'd found online. The keypad would reject them all with soft beeps and that mocking red glow. It was Chloe who found it in the way children find things that adults miss because they're looking too hard. Rebecca was going through a box of personal effects, someone's forgotten desk drawer contents, when Chloe wandered into the office, holding a book. "Mama, look, someone wrote in this." The journal was leather-bound, worn at the edges, pages yellowed with age. Chloe had found it on a shelf in what looked like a break room, wedged between a coffee-stained manual for the heating system and a stack of magazines from the 90s. Rebecca took it carefully. The leather was soft under her fingers, cracked in places like old skin. She opened to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost architectural in its evenness. Property of Victor Bellamy. Private. Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened the journal. The pages felt substantial, heavy with years and secrets. Victor Bellamy's handwriting filled every line with the careful precision of someone who knew these words might outlast him. The entries spanned from 2010 to 2018. Not daily observations, but periodic thoughts. The kind of raw honesty people commit to paper only when they believe no one will ever read it. Victor wrote about fear, economic instability that kept him awake through nights that stretched into dawn. Currency collapse scenarios he'd modeled 100 different ways, each one ending in chaos. The fragility of modern civilization held together by threads of trust that could snap at any moment. He wrote about his solution: preservation, storing value in forms that would survive any crisis, physical assets, tangible wealth, things that couldn't be erased by a market crash or deleted from a database. He wrote about this facility, which he called Winter Vault, his personal archive, his insurance policy against catastrophe, a place where he could protect what mattered most, not just for himself, but for whoever might need it in the future. The later entries turned philosophical. Victor knew he was dying. He wrote about regrets. No children, no close family, a life spent building walls instead of relationships. He wrote about his hope that Winter Vault would serve its purpose someday, that someone would find it and understand what he'd tried to do. And on one of the last pages, dated July 10th, 2018, 4 days before that final maintenance log entry, he wrote something that made Rebecca's breath catch. The code is what matters most. Not money, not metal, not even survival. The code is family. The code is love. The code is why we preserve anything at all. Below that, almost as an afterthought, 6 numbers written in the margin: July 14th, 1998. Rebecca stared at them. July 14th, 1998. She flipped back through the journal, searching for context, found it in an entry from 2008. Victor writing about the 10th anniversary of his mother's death, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father left, who'd worked 3 jobs to put him through college, who died before seeing him succeed, before knowing her son would become a billionaire. July 14th, 1998. The code wasn't random. It was a memorial. A son's grief encoded into 6 digits that would outlast him. Rebecca found one more item at the journal's back, an envelope sealed with wax that had cracked with age, addressed simply, "To whoever finds this." She broke the seal carefully. The letter inside was typed, dated August 1st, 2018, 8 days before Victor Bellamy died. The words blurred as she read them, tears she didn't know she was crying, making the ink swim. Victor explaining everything, how he'd spent 33 years building this repository, how he'd filled it with wealth he earned but never needed. Money that sat in accounts generating more money, while he sat in his house generating nothing but anxiety. What a waste, he wrote. What a terrible waste. He regretted being afraid, regretted not trusting people, regretted hoarding instead of helping. But he'd built this vault anyway, convinced himself he was being prudent, when the truth was he'd been selfish and scared and alone. Now he was leaving it to chance, to fate, to the universe's sense of justice. Someone would buy the property for almost nothing, and if that someone was desperate enough, or curious enough, or brave enough to explore fully, they'd find this vault, and everything in it would be legally theirs. No taxes owed, he'd already paid them. No estate claims, the estate didn't know it existed. Clean transfer, clear ownership, a gift from a dead man to whoever needed it most. His only request: don't do what I did. Don't hoard this wealth out of fear. Use it, build something, help people, be braver than I was, be kinder than I was, be better than I was. The letter ended with words that would stay with Rebecca for the rest of her life. I don't know who you are, I'll never meet you, but I'm trusting you with something I protected for 33 years. Use this wealth to build a life worth living. Help others build lives worth living, and maybe prove that people are better than I believed they were. Christmas night. Chloe sleeping peacefully. Rebecca stood before the door on Level 3 journal, in one hand, the code burning in her mind. 6 digits, a memorial to a mother Victor had loved and lost. Her fingers moved across the keypad. 0, 7, 1, 4, 9, 8. Each beep echoed in the concrete hallway. The screen flickered. Red changed to green. The word transformed locked, became open. Mechanical sounds came from deep within the door, heavy locks disengaging, bolts sliding back with the precision of Swiss clockwork. Rebecca grabbed the handle. It turned smoothly, despite years of disuse. The door, despite its obvious weight, swung inward with almost no resistance. Darkness beyond. Then motion sensors activated. Fluorescent lights flickered to life in sequence, flooding the space with illumination that seemed harsh after the bunker's softer lighting. What Rebecca saw made her knees weak, made her grip the doorframe for support, made her question whether she was really awake or still asleep in the bunk room, dreaming impossible things her desperate mind had conjured. The vault wasn't a room. It was a cathedral carved into living rock, 30 feet high at its apex, stretching back into the mountain, maybe 100 feet. And it was full, not with boxes or supplies or survival gear, full of wealth, organized wealth, cataloged wealth, preserved wealth arranged with obsessive care that spoke to years of planning. Glass cases lined both walls, each one climate-controlled, according to small displays showing temperature and humidity readings. The first case held coins, not loose change, but specimens, gold eagles catching the light, silver maples arranged by year, Morgan dollars from the 1800s each in its own protective capsule, foreign coins with unfamiliar scripts, Chinese pandas, Austrian philharmonics, South African Krugerrands. Rebecca moved forward slowly. Her footsteps echoed off concrete and steel. She pulled out an inventory card from the first case, the handwriting Victor's precise script labeled each piece. 1889, Carson City, Morgan dollar, MS, 65 condition, estimated value $45,000. One coin, $45,000, and there were hundreds of coins in this case alone. She sat on a bench, positioned in the center of the vault. Placed there, she realized by Victor for exactly this purpose. For the moment when the scope of wealth became overwhelming, the next case held paper currency, historical bills, large format notes from the early 1900s, ornate as art, silver certificates and gold certificates with engravings so detailed they looked monk-made, Confederate currency from the Civil War, German Reichsmarks, Soviet rubles, Chinese yuan from before the Revolution. Each bill a snapshot of empires that had crumbled. The inventory card read, Historical Currency Collection, 347 pieces, total estimated collector value $8.2 million. Rebecca's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe properly. The artwork section came next. Original pieces in climate-controlled frames, authentication certificates sealed in plastic sleeves beside each one. A harbor scene boats at sunset, impressionist brush strokes, luminous colors. Label: Harbor at Dusk, attributed to Frederick Child Hassam, circa 1900. Authentication by Sotheby's 2012. Estimated value $4.7 million. Nearly $5 million for a single painting. The canvas was maybe 2 feet by 3 feet. Beautiful, yes, but not large. And there were more. A bronze sculpture, a watercolor landscape, a modernist piece, each with its own staggering valuation. The main vault section took up the back half of the chamber. Safety deposit boxes lined the walls, floor to ceiling. Each box about the size of a shoebox, each one labeled with a date and sequential number. They started in the lower left corner with 1986-001 and proceeded chronologically upward and across, ending in the upper right with 2017-412. 412 boxes, 31 years of systematic accumulation, roughly 13 boxes per year, more than one per month, a systematic, almost ritualistic commitment to preservation. Rebecca approached the first box. A small key hung on a hook beside it, color-coded with a red tag. She took the key, inserted it into the lock, pulled the box from its slot. Heavy, dense with whatever it contained. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were gold coins. Krugerrands, South African gold pieces, each in its own protective case. She counted 20 coins. The documentation slip inside the box indicated each coin contained 1 troy ounce of gold purchased in June 1986 for $368 each. Current gold price, she'd seen it recently while researching Victor, was roughly $1,900 per ounce. 20 coins meant $38,000 in this one box. Just from the gold content alone, not counting any collector value. She opened another box at random. Bearer bonds, physical certificates from companies she recognized. General Electric, IBM, Exxon, each bond for $10,000 face value. A dozen of them, plus 30 years of accrued interest. Another box. Stock certificates, the old-fashioned paper kind most companies didn't issue anymore. 100 shares of Amazon purchased February 2001 at $11 per share. Current Amazon stock price, $137, over 1,200% return. One box out of 412. For the next hour, Rebecca worked through more boxes. Not all of them that would take days, but enough to understand the pattern. Victor had been systematic, diversifying across asset classes, time periods, types of wealth, gold and silver in various forms, platinum bars in later boxes, bearer bonds from the 80s and 90s, stock certificates from companies that had grown exponentially. Even cryptocurrency keys in the most recent boxes, USB drives with access codes to Bitcoin wallets purchased when the currency was worth pennies. Each box documented. Each box with an inventory card showing purchase information, current estimated value, storage notes. And at the central desk she found the master ledger, thick leather-bound book with marbled end papers. She opened it with reverence, as if it might disintegrate at her touch. The first page was dated January 15, 1986. Project Winter Vault, Personal Asset Preservation Initiative. Below that, Victor had written a manifesto in his precise hand about protecting wealth from chaos, about creating a repository that would survive any disaster, about filling it with assets that held value regardless of political systems or economic conditions. She turned pages reading his philosophy, his methodology, his obsessive attention to detail. Each entry meticulously recorded. Date, item, purchase price, storage location, current estimated value based on periodic assessments. The final page had a summary written in the same precise hand, but with slight tremors, suggesting age and illness. Dated March 28, 2018, just months before Victor died. Total asset inventory as of final assessment. Gold and precious metals, 47.2 million. Rare currency collection, 12.4 million. Investment-grade artwork, 33.8 million. Bearer bonds and corporate debt instruments, 41.6 million. Stock certificates and equity positions, 118.3 million. Cryptocurrency holdings, 56.7 million. Total estimated value, $310 million. $310 million. Rebecca sat in the climate-controlled vault, surrounded by more wealth than she'd ever imagined existing in one place. She thought about parking lots and cold and fear, about Chloe coughing in the back seat, about selling her father's tools, about the eviction notice, about clicking confirm bid on an auction she didn't understand. Every terrible decision, every desperate choice had led here, to this moment, standing in an underground vault surrounded by wealth beyond comprehension. It felt like fate. It felt like chance. It felt like the universe reaching down through concrete and steel and years of abandonment to offer one impossible second chance. She turned off the lights, stepped out, let the door seal shut behind her with mechanical finality. The locks re-engaged. The keypad cycled back to red, locked, securing $310 million that would still be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. But now she knew the code. Now she knew what was there. Now everything had changed. She climbed the stairs to level 1. To the bunk where Chloe slept peacefully, Comet clutched to her chest. Rebecca lay down beside her daughter, stared at the concrete ceiling. They were still homeless in a technical sense, still broke by any normal measure, still living in an underground bunker in the middle of nowhere. But everything had changed, and Rebecca Mitchell, who'd thought she'd hit rock bottom, who'd gambled her last dollars on desperate hope, who'd brought her daughter into a mountain to survive the winter, now held in her hands the means to do more than survive. She held the means to live, to rebuild, to help others who'd lost everything the way she had, to prove that second chances, no matter how impossible they seemed, were real. For 2 days, Rebecca couldn't return to the vault. The knowledge of what lay behind that door felt too heavy to touch. She moved through routines, making meals from their dwindling canned goods, cleaning spaces that were already clean, keeping Chloe entertained with stories and drawings. But her mind spun through scenarios that had no easy answers. December 27th. Chloe sat at the common room table drawing a cross-section picture of their new home with smiling stick figures in each room. Crayons scratched across paper. "Mama, when can we see what's in the special room?" Rebecca's hand stilled on the can of soup she'd been organizing for the 3rd time. "What makes you think there's something special in there?" Chloe shrugged, still drawing. "Because you keep looking at it, and because your face does the thinking thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you're thinking really hard about something important, but you don't want to tell me yet." She looked up, 7-year-old eyes far too perceptive. "It's okay if it's a secret, Mama, but Mrs. Patterson at school says secrets are heavier when you carry them alone. Rebecca sat across from her daughter. Her throat felt tight. You're right. There is something in that room, something unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? I don't know yet, baby. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Chloe considered this, then returned to her drawing. Well, maybe we should look at it together. Mrs. Patterson also says 2 brains are better than 1. Despite everything, Rebecca smiled. Mrs. Patterson sounds very wise. That afternoon, Rebecca made a decision. She needed help, professional help, the kind that understood property law and inheritance, and whether what she'd found was actually hers to claim. She drove the Civic down the mountain roads, finally plowed after New Year's to the gas station in Cristola. The weathered woman, whose name tag read Shirley, recognized her. You folks make it through that storm okay? We did. Thank you. Rebecca hesitated. I need a property lawyer. Can you recommend anyone? Shirley raised an eyebrow. You in some kind of trouble, honey? No, just found something I need help with. Try Donald Fletcher in Colorado Springs. Good man, fair rates. Tell him Shirley sent you. The law office of Donald Fletcher sat above a bakery on Tejon Street. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the stairwell. The conference room was small walls lined with law books and certificates. Donald Fletcher was mid-50s, gray-streaked hair, reading glasses on a chain. His hands looked calloused, weathered. The hands of someone who'd worked with tools before he'd worked with law. Rebecca carried a manila folder with all the documentation, the deed, the auction records, photographs of the vault she'd taken on her phone, Victor's letter, pages from the master ledger showing those impossible numbers. Donald read for 20 minutes without speaking. Occasionally, he made notes on a yellow legal pad. His eyebrows rose when he got to the vault photos. He lingered longest on Victor's letter, reading it twice. Finally, he removed his glasses. Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you something very directly. Is any of this illegal? Are you in danger? Do I need to be concerned about how you acquired this property? No, I bought it legally at a government surplus auction. Everything I've shown you is exactly how I found it. The previous owner is dead. His estate sold the property. I bought it fair and square. Donald nodded slowly. All right, then. I need another hour to research some case law. Can you wait? Rebecca and Chloe spent that hour walking around downtown Colorado Springs. They looked in shop windows they couldn't afford. 8 sandwiches Rebecca had packed, sat on a bench, watching people rush past with coffee cups and briefcases and normal problems. When they returned, Donald had his yellow legal pad covered in notes. Okay, I've consulted with 2 colleagues and reviewed Colorado abandoned property, law, estate law, and auction law. Here's what I can tell you. He outlined the good news. The property was legally hers. Everything within the property boundaries at time of transfer became hers as the new owner. Standard real estate law. The more complex question was whether the estate could claim these were assets they didn't know about, and therefore should have been part of probate. He'd researched Victor Bellamy's estate settlement, completed in 2019, about a year after his death. Everything liquidated or donated according to his will. The property had been listed as undeveloped land valued at approximately $5,000, sold at auction after no private buyers emerged. So they didn't know what was there. Correct. And here's where it gets interesting. From a legal standpoint, Victor Bellamy clearly structured his ownership to hide this facility. He used shell corporations, remote holdings, minimal documentation. He deliberately kept it out of his estate planning. That means he intended for it to pass to a subsequent owner without estate involvement. His letter makes that intent explicit. Donald leaned forward. Intent matters in law. Victor wanted someone to find this. He wanted it to go to that person. He created the conditions for that transfer. You are that person. You found it. You own the property it's on, and his documented intent was for you to have it. That's a very strong legal position. Rebecca heard the hesitation in his voice. But it needs to be done correctly, transparently. We need to establish clear ownership, document everything, and, most importantly, handle the tax implications properly. While you legally own these assets, the moment you liquidate them, sell the gold, sell the artwork, access the funds, that becomes taxable income. The IRS will want their share, approximately 47% in capital gains. And if we don't handle this properly from the start, you could face audits penalties or worse. What do I need to do? You need to hire me. He explained his rates. $250 an hour or 5% contingency. 5% of $310 million was over $15 million. That's a lot of money. It is, but it's also fair compensation for the work involved, and it ensures my interests align with yours. I want to establish the highest possible legal value because it benefits both of us. But Miss Mitchell, if you can't afford hourly fees right now, I understand. We can structure this however works for you. Rebecca thought about the $750 she'd paid for the property, about the $50 she had left in her pocket, about the $310 million sitting in a vault in a mountain. Contingency is fine. 5% is fair. When can we start? They started that afternoon. Over the next 3 weeks, Rebecca's life became a careful balance. During the day, while Chloe attended the small elementary school in Cristola, enrollment waived supplies donated by the PTA. After Rebecca explained their situation, Rebecca worked with Donald to document, catalog, and legally establish every asset in the vault. They brought in specialists, each one required to sign non-disclosure agreements before even learning the location. A rare coin expert from Denver who spent 4 days examining the collection, emerging with documentation that made Rebecca's head spin. Final authenticated value, $53.8 million, higher than Victor's estimate, because several pieces had appreciated significantly. An art authenticator from Santa Fe who verified provenance and condition. Final value, $38.2 million. A precious metals assayer from Phoenix, a forensic accountant to track down which companies still honored old paper stock certificates and what they were worth now. That accountant worked for 2 weeks. The stock certificates alone, particularly the tech stocks that had split multiple times since Victor's purchases, were valued at $167.4 million, much higher than estimated. The total after 3 weeks of exhaustive documentation came to $327.6 million, $17 million more than Victor's final estimate, thanks to market appreciation and conservative initial valuations. Donald filed paperwork with Teller County establishing Rebecca's ownership of the property and all contents. He filed documentation with the IRS, establishing intent to declare income from asset liquidation. Everything transparent, everything proactive, leaving no room for future questions about legitimacy or intent to hide wealth. The key is that we're not trying to avoid taxes or hide anything. We're establishing clear ownership and then following every rule precisely. The IRS appreciates that. Courts appreciate that. And it protects you from anyone who might later claim you did something improper. In the third week of authentication, a man appeared. Rebecca was organizing storage rooms on level 2 when she heard a vehicle outside. She climbed to the surface, found a man photographing the bunker entrance from a distance. "Can I help you?" He turned. Late 40s, professional demeanor, expensive camera. "Just documenting property boundaries for a survey. You're the new owner?" "I am." "Stephen Montgomery." He handed her a business card, private investigator, licensed in Colorado. "I was hired to locate certain assets belonging to Victor Bellamy's estate." Rebecca's stomach dropped. This property was legally sold by the estate. "I'm sure it was." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But my client has questions about what might be inside it. They'll be in contact soon. You might want to secure legal representation, Miss Mitchell." He left before she could respond. 2 days later, Detective Linda Brennan from the Teller County Sheriff's Department appeared, professional direct, carrying a notebook. "Miss Mitchell, I have some questions about your situation here." Rebecca's hands went cold. "What kind of questions?" "We've received reports about suspicious activity at this location. Anonymous tips suggested you might have discovered hidden assets, possibly stolen property, and you've been making large donations around town. School district got $50,000. Community center got $30,000. Where's that money coming from?" Rebecca invoked her attorney immediately. "You'll need to speak with Donald Fletcher." Detective Brennan took his information, left with a warning that she'd be conducting an inquiry. But she returned a week later with a different attitude. "Most people finding sudden wealth try to hide it. You've been remarkably transparent. I'll be monitoring the situation, but I respect what you're doing." Donald filed all the necessary documentation. Everything was in place. Legal ownership established. Tax protocols ready. And then on March 8, 2026, Kenneth Blackwell knocked on the bunker door. Rebecca was organizing maintenance records when she heard the knock. No one visited here. The isolation was total. She opened the door to find a man in an expensive suit, charcoal gray, Italian shoes caked with mud, mid-40s dark hair graying at the temples, cold eyes that assessed her with the calculation of someone used to evaluating assets. A Mercedes SUV was parked behind her Civic. "Miss Mitchell," Kenneth Blackwell, "we need to talk." Every instinct told Rebecca to refuse him entry, but refusing seemed like admission of guilt. She led him to the common room. He sat without invitation. "I'll be direct. Victor Bellamy was my uncle, my mother's half-brother. We weren't close. Family complications. But when he died, estate lawyers were supposed to locate all heirs. They found none. Victor never married, had no children. The estate was liquidated. But they missed something." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. "This facility, Winter Vault, and everything in it. I've done my research, Miss Mitchell. I know what's down there. I know what it's worth." Rebecca's hands clenched beneath the table. "I bought this property legally." I'm not disputing that, but the contents weren't included in estate probate. They should have been. As Victor's blood relative, I have standing to contest your ownership of vault contents under Colorado intestate succession law. He slid a document across the table. Legal filing. Claim submitted to Teller County Court. However, I'm a reasonable man. Litigation is expensive, time-consuming, uncertain outcome, so I'm prepared to settle. Give me 80%, you keep 20% for your trouble. That's still over $65 million, Miss Mitchell. More than enough for a comfortable life. And you avoid a legal battle you might lose. His smile held no warmth. Courts tend to favor blood relatives over opportunistic strangers. No offense intended. He handed her a business card. Have your lawyer call mine. Let's resolve this civilly. As he stood to leave, he added one final warning. I'd advise against liquidating any assets before this is settled. Could be construed as intent to defraud rightful heirs. His Mercedes disappeared down the mountain road. Rebecca sat holding the business card, hands shaking. Donald's response was immediate when she called. Don't respond to anything without consulting me first. And Rebecca, don't talk to him again without me present. That evening she remembered something. The librarian in Cristola who'd mentioned knowing Victor. Rebecca drove into town, found Carol Henderson at the library preparing to close. Miss Mitchell, how are you settling in? I need to ask about Victor Bellamy. You said you knew him. Carol's expression shifted. She locked the library door, led Rebecca to a quiet corner. Victor came here every month for 20 years. Always the 14th. Never checked out books. Just sat, read newspapers, used computers. Polite, but distant. He paid for our new computer system in 2015. Anonymous donation, but I knew it was him. She pulled out a book from behind the circulation desk. He left this behind once. I kept it hoping he'd return. He never did. Advanced Cryptography and Digital Security, 2010 edition. Inside the cover, a handwritten note in Victor's precise script. Remember, truth hides in plain sight. July 14th, 1998. Not equal to just a date. Carol's eyes were serious. People in town said Victor was paranoid. I think he was just careful. Whatever you found up there, be cautious who you tell. The next day, another visitor. Frail late 70s, leaning on a cane. Expensive coat, but worn, well-loved. Miss Mitchell, I'm William Ashford, Victor Bellamy's former business partner. Rebecca's guard went up immediately. I'm not discussing the property with anyone except my lawyer. I'm not here for money. His voice was tired. I'm 78. I have cancer. Maybe 6 months. I just wanted to see this place one last time. Against her better judgment, Rebecca listened. Bill Ashford had founded Bellamy Ashford Technologies with Victor in 1983. Sold to IBM in '99 for $1.3 billion. Victor got 80%, Bill 20%. Victor's idea, his patents. We were like brothers. Then Victor changed after the sale. Became obsessed with preservation. Spent millions on this facility and others. Pushed me away. Said I couldn't understand. We didn't speak the last 15 years of his life. His eyes held genuine pain. When Victor died, I tried to locate all his properties. Lawyers found most. But Victor was clever. hid things in shell companies I didn't know existed. I hired an investigator, traced this property, but by then you'd already bought it." He looked at Rebecca directly. "I'm not here for the vault. I'm here because I heard Kenneth Blackwell is contesting your ownership. And I need you to know something about Victor and his half-sister Diana." Bill explained that Diana had contacted Victor in 2016 after 40 years of silence, claimed she wanted reconciliation. Victor saw through it immediately, told Bill she only wanted money, always had. Victor was furious. He had his attorney draft a letter formally disinheriting Diana and all her descendants, had it notarized, filed with the Colorado Bar Association. I witnessed him sign it. He handed Rebecca contact information for David Melbourne, Victor's attorney. "That letter destroys Kenneth's case. Victor explicitly excluded Diana's family line, and he documented his intent for this vault to go to whoever found it, not to relatives." "Why are you helping me?" "Because I'm dying, Miss Mitchell. I don't need money. I need to know Victor's final wishes are honored. His letter to you showed me, proves he wanted someone like you to have it. Someone who'd use it to help people, not hoard it like we did." Bill Ashford became an unexpected ally. He contacted David Melbourne, who confirmed the disinheritance letter existed, and agreed to testify. But the pressure mounted from other directions. Angela Wright from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division appeared with thick packets of forms. "We need complete accounting of all income and expenditures for the past 5 years before you liquidate anything. Tax evasion is a federal crime." And Donald worked with her, providing every document, every receipt, every transaction. "Your client is being remarkably transparent," Angela admitted. "Most people in her position try to hide wealth. She's doing everything right." The court hearing was set for September 24th, 6 months away. Donald explained the timeline was actually fast for a case of this magnitude, $327 million in dispute. The court would be thorough. Those 6 months felt endless. Rebecca couldn't access vault assets without appearing guilty. Kenneth's attorneys filed motions monthly. The IRS monitored every transaction. Joshua Graham, a journalist from the Colorado Independent, started investigating, writing pieces that cast doubt on Rebecca's story. But support built too. Shirley from the gas station organized a petition. Father Patrick Matthews from the Christola Church wrote a character letter. Detective Brennan provided a statement about Rebecca's transparency. And Bill Ashford, growing weaker from cancer, prepared to testify, despite his declining health. September 24th arrived cold and clear. Teller County Courthouse, 9 months after Kenneth first appeared. Rebecca wore the only dress she owned, bought second-hand, but clean and pressed. Donald carried his scuffed briefcase containing 9 months of preparation. Kenneth arrived with 3 Denver attorneys, designer suits, matching portfolios, the kind of legal team that charged $800 an hour. Judge Martha Kerrigan presiding, 62 gray hair, pulled back rimless glasses, 28 years on the bench, reputation for no-nonsense rulings, the courtroom packed, reporters, Christola residents, Sheriff Wade, Angela Wright taking notes, Bill Ashford in a wheelchair oxygen tank beside him. This wasn't just a legal hearing. This was Rebecca's life being judged in public. Kenneth's lead attorney was Richard Sutherland, Princeton Law, $2 million in career wins. He presented genealogy evidence systematically. Diana Blackwell, née Hawthorne, Victor's half-sister, different mothers, father's affair, birth certificates, DNA tests, blood connection irrefutable. Your Honor, Victor Bellamy died intestate regarding this facility. His will made no mention of Winter Vault Holdings. Estate lawyers failed to locate all heirs, but they exist. Under Colorado Revised Statutes 1511-103, when deceased has no spouse or children, estate passes to siblings. If siblings deceased to their descendants, Kenneth Blackwell has legitimate standing. He called an expert witness, a state law professor from Stanford, testifying on intestate succession precedent. Donald's turn. He stood looking small compared to the Denver team. Your Honor, this isn't about what Colorado law typically requires. This is about documented intent. He presented Victor's letter to the court. Judge Kerrigan read it carefully. Silence settled over the courtroom like snowfall. Donald presented evidence methodically. Winter Vault Holdings, LLC, created in '96 with layers of legal structure for secrecy. Victor's journal entries about preserving for someone who needs it, not family. Maintenance logs showing obsessive care until death, then sudden cessation, proving Victor was the only one with knowledge. His property law expert testified. When deceased creates conditions for transfer outside estate channels and documents intent explicitly, courts generally honor testamentary intent. This letter is unmistakable. Rebecca took the stand, sworn in, faced the judge and Kenneth's cold stare and the packed courtroom. Donald kept his questions simple. Miss Mitchell, tell the court how you came to purchase this property. She explained without embellishment. Lost job, lost home, 6 weeks in the car with Chloe, temperature in the teens, daughter coughing, desperate for shelter, not treasure. Found listing at 2 a.m, bid $750, nearly everything left. I wasn't looking for wealth, Your Honor. I was looking for a place where my daughter could be safe. Everything else I found by accident, by not giving up. What did you do when you found the vault? I read Mr. Bellamy's letter. I understood what he wanted. He wanted someone who'd use the wealth to help others. He spent 33 years afraid to use it. I won't make that mistake. She described the plans forming: apprenticeship programs, transitional housing, foundation to help people who'd lost everything. Kenneth took the stand, polished, confident, story of estranged family, mother reaching out to Uncle Victor being rebuffed, dying hurt. What would you do with this wealth if awarded to you? Invest it properly, ensure returns for years, establish a family trust for the Bellamy legacy, and charitable work. Slight hesitation, eventually, Your Honor. But first priority would be securing the assets, professional management, not just emotional giveaways. He glanced at Rebecca with thinly veiled disdain. Donald stood for his final presentation. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence discovered last week in Victor Bellamy's archived legal files. Courtroom stirred. Kenneth looked confused. Letter dated April 12, 2016, from Victor Bellamy to his attorney, David Melbourne, notarized and filed per Colorado law. Judge Kerrigan read aloud. Her voice carried through the silent courtroom. Victor's formal instruction regarding his estate. Diana Blackwell contacting him after 40 years. He knew it was about money. It always was with her. He wanted it on record. Diana Blackwell and her descendants received nothing. Specific and explicit disinheritance. Winter Vault Holdings excluded from estate, not passing through probate, belonging to whoever found it. This is my will. This is my intent. Honor it." Silence crashed through the courtroom like a wave breaking. Kenneth's face drained of color. Sutherland scrambled. "Your Honor, we question authenticity. It's notarized, filed with the Colorado Bar Association. Attorney David Melbourne is here to testify if needed." Bill Ashford wheeled forward weakly. "Your Honor, I can verify. Victor told me in 2016 he disinherited Diana. He said she only wanted money. He wouldn't reward greed. Victor was my best friend for 40 years. This letter is absolutely authentic." Judge Kerrigan turned to Kenneth. "Mr. Blackwell, your uncle explicitly excluded you and your mother. He knew about Diana's 2016 contact. He chose to disinherit her line completely. Combined with documented intent in the letter to Miss Mitchell, you have no standing to contest." Sutherland tried once more. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to verify." "Denied. This evidence is dispositive. I'm ruling in favor of Rebecca Mitchell. Victor Bellamy's intent is crystal clear. He deliberately structured transfer outside estate channels. He explicitly disinherited Kenneth Blackwell's family line. He documented his wish for the finder to inherit the wealth. Miss Mitchell purchased property, legally found vault, legally inherits contents legally. Motion to contest ownership is denied." The gavel slammed. Kenneth stood abruptly. "This is absurd." Sutherland grabbed his arm. "Kenneth, we're leaving." They exited quickly, Kenneth's angry voice echoing in the hallway. Rebecca sat stunned, tears streaming down her face. Donald grinned. "Congratulations, it's really yours now." Cristola residents cheered. Bill Ashford managed a weak smile before his strength failed, and attendants wheeled him away. Outside the courthouse, people waited. Shirley hugged Rebecca hard. Father Patrick offered a blessing. Detective Brennan shook her hand. Angela Wright from the IRS waited by her car. "Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. Now, let's discuss taxes." She handed Rebecca a revised assessment. "Your attorney and I reviewed everything. Documentation is exemplary. You'll pay approximately 47% capital gains on liquidation. File quarterly estimates. Keep detailed records. Do that, and we have no issues." Angela almost smiled. "You're surprisingly honest for someone with $327 million. Try not to let it change you." It was over. 9 months of pressure, 9 months of uncertainty, 9 months wondering if everything would be taken away. Now it was hers, legally, irrevocably. $327 million in assets, and the freedom to use them the way Victor had always hoped someone would, the way he'd never been brave enough to use them himself. With legal clearance established and tax protocols in place, Rebecca began the careful process of accessing the vault. Donald advised starting small testing every step before committing to larger liquidations. October 2026. Rebecca selected a modest portion of the gold coin collection, worked with a reputable dealer in Denver who'd been vetted by Donald and came with impeccable references. The coins were authenticated, appraised, photographed from every angle. The transaction took 3 weeks, paperwork thick as a phone book, every signature witnessed, every transfer documented. The sale generated $2,300,000. After capital gains tax, at 47%, $219,000 remained in an account bearing Rebecca Mitchell's name. Real money, spendable, impossible, her first million. She stared at the bank statement for 10 minutes, unable to process what the numbers meant. Not just for her and Chloe, but for what it represented. Proof that Victor's impossible gift was real. That the second chance she'd been given wasn't a dream that would evaporate when she woke. First priority was security, not the vault that could await. Security for Chloe, for their future. She purchased a house in Cristola, 3 bedrooms on 2 acres. The structure needed work, but the bones were solid. Big kitchen where Chloe could spread homework across a real table. Yard where she could play without navigating parking lot asphalt. Windows that let in actual sunlight. Purchase price $285,000. Paid in cash. The realtor's eyes widened when Rebecca handed over a cashier's check, but she asked no questions. Rebecca furnished simply. Comfort and durability over showroom glamour. A couch that could withstand a child's abuse. Beds with solid frames. Kitchen table made from real wood that would last decades. She bought a 3-year-old Toyota Highlander to replace the dying Civic. Test drove it twice. Made sure the heat worked, the engine sounded right. The transmission shifted smoothly. Paid $32,000 cash. She established a college fund for Chloe that would grow over the next decade. Paid off every medical bill that had accumulated during those desperate months. Set up an emergency fund that could support them for 5 years, even if she never worked again. Total spent on personal security, approximately $600,000. It felt like a fortune. It was nothing compared to what remained locked in the mountain. Second priority was purpose. Rebecca understood engines, understood systems, understood how broken things could be fixed. She also understood what it meant to be broken yourself, to lose everything, to wonder if you'd ever find your way back. November 2026. She purchased a vacant garage on Cristola's main road. The building had sat empty for 2 years since the previous owner retired. The space was good high ceilings, concrete floor bay doors that still worked. Just needed updating and someone willing to invest in it. She spent 6 weeks on renovation, worked alongside local contractors, paying them fairly for their expertise while learning what she could. New lifts installed that could handle anything from compact cars to diesel trucks. Diagnostic equipment that could read the computer systems in modern vehicles. Hand tools arranged on pegboards, the way her father had taught her. The way she remembered from before everything got sold. She painted the walls bright white, clean, professional, hung photographs of classic cars, a 47 Chevy, a 69 Mustang, a 57 Thunderbird. Beauty mattered even in a workplace, especially in a workplace. The sign went up on a Wednesday morning in January 2027. Monroe Automotive. Honest workfare prices, second chances. That last part was deliberate. Rebecca didn't just want to fix cars. She wanted to train people who needed what she'd once needed. Skills, dignity, a path forward when every other door had closed. She partnered with the community college in Colorado Springs to create a formal apprenticeship program. 6 months of training, full-time hours, living wage while they learned $18 an hour more than most entry positions, housing assistance available for those who needed it, priority enrollment for people getting back on their feet, formerly homeless individuals, single parents, people with criminal records who couldn't get hired elsewhere, veterans struggling with civilian transition. The program launched in December. Rebecca put out word through shelters and veteran services, through Father Patrick's church network, through Detective Brennan's contacts in social services. Gary Sullivan walked into the shop on the first Monday, 52 years old, Army veteran, Afghanistan deployment that left scars you couldn't see but could feel in how he held himself. PTSD made holding jobs difficult. He'd lost his apartment, lost custody of his teenage son, was living at a Denver shelter when someone told him about the program. He stood in the doorway like a man expecting to be turned away, expecting disappointment because that's what the world had taught him to expect. "I saw your sign. The apprenticeship thing. That real or just talk?" Rebecca looked up from the intake forms she'd been organizing. Saw herself 6 months ago, saw desperation trying to hide behind dignity. "It's real. You have any experience with cars?" "No, ma'am, but I can follow instructions. Show up on time. Work hard." He paused. The next words cost him something. "I just need somebody to give me a shot." Rebecca recognized that tone, had heard it in her own voice not that long ago. "When can you start?" "Now. Today." "Whenever you want." "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Bring work boots and willingness to learn. That's all you need." Gary showed up at 6:45 the next morning, showed up at 6:45 every morning after that for 6 months straight. Rebecca taught him everything she knew, how engines worked, the relationship between combustion and power, how to diagnose problems by listening to sounds most people ignored, how to rebuild a transmission, replace brake systems, read electrical diagrams. His hands were steady even when his mind wasn't. He found focus in the precision of mechanical work, found purpose in making broken things whole again. By June 2027, Gary was confident, skilled, ready. Rebecca helped him launch Sullivan Mobile Repair, truck-based service with lower overhead and flexibility that suited his needs. She co-signed the loan for his truck and tools, $35,000, that made Donald nervous, but Rebecca insisted was the right call. The first month was slow, 2 or 3 clients. Gary called her twice, voice tight with worry that this wouldn't work. Give it time. Word spreads when you do good work. Second month business picked up. Third month he was booked solid, turning away jobs, thinking about expanding. He regained partial custody of his son that summer. The boy started working with him on weekends, learning the trade, rebuilding more than engines, rebuilding a relationship one oil change at a time. Rebecca established transitional housing next. January 2027. Purchased an abandoned building on Main Street, former hardware store that big box retailers had killed. The structure was solid but needed complete renovation. She converted it into 6 apartments, each one fully furnished, practical furniture that would last, full kitchens, clean bathrooms, everything someone needed to rebuild stability. Terms were simple. Free rent for up to 1 year while residents got back on their feet. No credit checks, no background requirements, just a commitment to try. Nathan and Kathleen Foster moved in first. Nathan was 37, construction worker, until a job site accident crushed 2 vertebrae in his lower back. Kathleen, 35, waitress working part-time because someone had to manage their 2 kids. Sophie, 10, Lucas, 7. Medical bills from Nathan's injury had consumed their savings like fire through dry grass. Then their apartment, then their dignity. They'd cycled through shelters and their car in shelters again, each move stripping away another piece of normalcy. Kathleen filled out the application with shaking hands. Things like this don't happen to people like us. There's always a catch. No catch, just an opportunity. Rebecca approved them immediately, provided first month's expenses, enrolled Nathan in computer training classes so he could transition from physical labor to office work, arranged childcare assistance so Kathleen could take a full-time position. The kids got school supplies, winter clothes, stability for the first time in 18 months. 8 months later, Nathan worked as a dispatcher for a construction company, coordinating crews and schedules from behind a desk instead of lifting steel beams. Kathleen had been promoted to assistant manager at her restaurant. They were saving money again, looking at apartments they could afford on their own. Sophie and Lucas were thriving, grades improving, smiles coming easier. Rebecca met Kathleen for coffee one morning in March 2028. Kathleen's hands wrapped around her mug like she was holding something precious. "You saved our lives. You know that, right? You saved our lives. You saved yourselves. I just gave you tools to work with." Kathleen's eyes filled, not quite crying, but close. "But nobody else gave us tools. Everybody else gave us forms to fill out and reasons we didn't qualify. Doors that slammed before we finished explaining. You gave us hope, and hope is worth more than any amount of money." That moment, sitting in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning with a woman who'd found her way back from the edge, was worth more to Rebecca than the entire vault of gold and silver and art locked in the mountain. The wall in her office at Monroe Automotive held photographs of every person who'd come through the apprenticeship program. 28 faces now, each one with a story of transformation written in the lines around their eyes and the way they smiled for the camera. Gary's photo was first, upper left corner, a reminder of where this started. Others followed. Carmen, former addict, now owned a body shop. Deshaun X. Khan, who couldn't get hired anywhere, now specialized in European imports. Linda, domestic violence survivor, now taught classes at the program. Each faced proof that second chances worked when given genuinely. March 2028, 18 months after the court victory. A knock on Monroe Automotive after hours. That quiet time when Rebecca was alone, finishing paperwork. She looked up from the invoice she was reviewing. Kenneth Blackwell stood in the doorway, but transformed. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. The cold confidence that had radiated from him in court had been stripped away. What remained was exhaustion and something that looked like shame. "Mr. Blackwell, what are you doing here? I need to apologize." He didn't come in until she gestured, stood just inside the door like a man who expected to be thrown out and would accept it as deserved. "I was desperate when I came after you. My investments had failed, bad decisions compounded by worse timing. I was facing bankruptcy, losing my home. When I found out about Uncle Victor's vault, I saw it as my only way out, a lifeline I felt entitled to because we shared blood." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I didn't think about what Victor wanted, didn't care who you were or what you'd been through. I just saw money I convinced myself should be mine." The envelope looked thin, worn. "I lost everything anyway. The legal fees bankrupted me. My firm let me go. My wife left, took the kids. I'm living in a studio apartment in Aurora now, working retail at GameStop for $13 an hour. He held out the envelope. "This is what's left after I sold everything I had. $800. It's not enough to repay your legal fees, not even close, but it's all I have. And I wanted you to know I understand now. I understand what desperation feels like, what it means to lose everything. I'm sorry for what I tried to do to you." Rebecca looked at the envelope without taking it. $800, the exact amount she'd had when she bought the bunker. The universe had a sense of poetry. "Keep your money, Mr. Blackwell." His head came up, confusion crossing his face. "What? I can't give you millions, but I can give you what I give everyone who comes through that door, a chance." She leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, not too defensive, just steady. The Whitfield Foundation needs a case manager, someone who can sit across from people in crisis and actually understand what they're going through. Someone who knows what rock bottom looks like from personal experience. It pays $48,000 a year, has health insurance. It's honest work helping people who need help. You interested? Kenneth stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. "Why would you help me after what I tried to do?" "Because second chances aren't earned, Mr. Blackwell. They're given. Mr. Bellamy gave me one. I'm giving you one. What you do with it, whether you waste it or build something meaningful, that's entirely up to you." His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "I don't deserve this." "Nobody deserves second chances. That's the whole point. You start Monday if you want it. 8 a.m. at the Foundation office in Colorado Springs. Show up ready to work." He nodded, unable to speak, shook her hand with both of his, left quickly like he was afraid she might change her mind. Chloe appeared from the office doorway. Backpack still on her shoulders from school. She'd heard everything. "That was the right thing, Mama." "Yeah, baby, I think it was." 6 months later, Kenneth thrived as case manager, genuinely happy in a way he'd never been chasing money. His ex-wife noticed the change, started cautiously rebuilding contact. The kids visited on weekends. He'd found redemption not in wealth, but in service. December 2028, 3 years after Rebecca had stood in snow with a frozen key, staring at what looked like a tomb. Gary Sullivan visited on a Wednesday afternoon, carrying an envelope that looked official. "Boss got something for you." Rebecca looked up from the engine she was rebuilding, wiped her hands on a rag. "First loan payment, plus interest." "Gary, we agreed you didn't need to pay interest. The loan terms—" "I know what the terms say, but I want to pay interest. You gave me my life back. This is how I say thank you. This is how I show you it mattered." Gary now had 2 trucks operating under Sullivan Mobile Repair. Had hired another veteran to run the second truck, full custody of his son who worked with him after school and weekends. The relationship rebuilt, the future secure. The wall of transformation in Rebecca's office held 28 photographs. Would soon be 30, each face a story, each story proof that the work mattered. Christmas arrived with fresh snow and crisp cold that made everything feel clean. Rebecca and Chloe spent the morning in their house, the real house with heat and running water, and a kitchen table where they ate breakfast together. They opened presents that were meaningful rather than expensive. Books Chloe had been wanting, a new set of metric wrenches for Rebecca premium snap-on tools she could afford now, but chose carefully because quality mattered more than cost. Handmade items they'd crafted for each other with time and attention. The afternoon was for the Whitfield Foundation community meal. 150 people came. Families the foundation had helped find housing, people who'd gone through the apprenticeship program, volunteers who gave their time, community members who'd watched this transformation happen and wanted to be part of it. Gary was there with his son teaching the teenager how to carve the turkey like it was a skill worth passing down. The Foster family arrived with homemade tamales, Kathleen insisting on contributing something after everything they'd received. Kenneth Blackwell worked the room with quiet efficiency, coordinating meal service, checking in with families, transformed from entitled antagonist into someone useful, someone who'd found purpose in helping others climb out of holes he'd once fallen into himself. Father Patrick blessed the meal. Detective Brennan helped serve. Shirley managed the dessert table with the authority of someone who'd been feeding this town for 40 years. Bill Ashford's chair sat empty. He'd passed peacefully in September, left everything to Rebecca for the foundation. She'd established the Bellamy Ashford Fellowship in his name. Full-ride scholarships for kids from families rebuilding after crisis. Rebecca stood in the back of the room with Chloe beside her, watched the movement and laughter and connections forming between people who'd all been broken in different ways, now healing together. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, useful in a way that mattered, purposeful in a way that would outlast her, like her life had meaning beyond just surviving. This is what wealth is for, she thought. Not hoarding, not hiding, not protecting against imaginary disasters. This, connection, community, hope passed forward like a torch. Carol Henderson from the library approached with a wrapped package. Rebecca, I have something, was saving it for the right moment. She unwrapped an old journal, different from the one Chloe had found. This one dated from 1983. Victor's original journal, from before the money, before the fear, before he forgot who he wanted to be. Rebecca opened it carefully. The handwriting was the same precise script, but younger, lighter, full of hope instead of regret. Young Victor writing about dreams, building something that matters, helping people, not just making money. Friendship, family, love, the things that last. The final entry before he sold his company. I'm about to be very rich. I hope it doesn't ruin me. Carol's eyes were serious, knowing. It did ruin him, Rebecca. The money made him afraid, made him small. But you're using it exactly how young Victor dreamed, before he forgot how. You're who he wished he'd been. Rebecca held the journal, tears streaming down her face that she didn't try to hide. Thank you, Carol. The librarian squeezed her hand, moved away to let her have the moment. Rebecca thought about Victor Bellamy, about a brilliant man who'd built an empire and then spent 33 years hiding from the world, hoarding wealth against disasters that never came, dying alone with regrets thick as the concrete walls he'd built around himself. And she thought about his final gift. Not the $327 million. That was just metal and paper and numbers in ledgers. The real gift was the choice, the chance to prove that people could be better than fear, that given resources and opportunity, some would choose kindness over hoarding, that wealth only mattered if it did something, if it created something, if it helped someone. The next morning came early. Mornings always came early, when you had work you wanted to do instead of work you had to do. Rebecca was under the hood of a 1967 Mustang by 7 a.m., hands covered in grease, T-shirts stained with oil that would never fully wash out. The car belonged to a widow in town. Husband had died and left her with a classic she didn't know how to maintain but couldn't bear to sell. Rebecca was rebuilding the carburetor. Patient work requiring precision. The kind of work that made time disappear. Gary arrived carrying coffee for both of them. "Morning, boss. Got good news. 4 new clients this week from referrals. And Mrs. Henderson wants a full restoration on her husband's old pickup truck." Rebecca grinned from under the hood. "That's excellent. You taking the restoration job." "If you'll supervise. Still learning body work. Don't want to mess up something that means that much to her." "Of course I'll help. Bring it by tomorrow and we'll assess what needs doing." Chloe was at the shop desk doing homework before school started. Now, 10 years old, thriving. She looked up from her math worksheet. "Mama, can we get pizza tonight?" "Yeah, baby, soon as I finish this carburetor." Gary laughed, sipped his coffee. "You know, Rebecca, you could hire someone to do the dirty work now. You've got more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes." Rebecca looked at her greasy hands, the oil under her fingernails that never quite came clean no matter how hard she scrubbed, the calluses from years of turning wrenches, proof of work done with her own hands instead of delegating to others. "Nah, this is the work. This is what's real." The phone rang. Monica, from the foundation, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant someone needed help urgently. "Rebecca got a family that needs assistance. Young mother, 3 kids under 6, living in their car for the past month. Situation sounds familiar." Rebecca wiped her hands on the rag. "Left dark smears on red fabric." "Tell her I'll be there in an hour." She turned to Gary. "Think you can finish this carburetor adjustment?" "You taught me well. I got this." Rebecca and Chloe walked out together into the bright Colorado morning. December sunshine reflecting off snow that had fallen overnight. The Highlander started immediately. Heat poured from the vents, so different from those months in the Civic when warmth was a luxury they couldn't afford. They pulled onto the main road, heading toward Colorado Springs, toward the foundation office, toward another family that was right now sitting in a car somewhere, wondering if they'd ever be warm again, wondering if anyone cared, wondering if hope was something that existed for people like them. Chloe buckled her seatbelt, looked at her mother. "Mama, that lady on the phone sounded scared, like we used to be." "Yeah, baby, but she won't be scared for long." Rebecca accelerated smoothly. The Highlander handled the icy roads with confidence the Civic never had. Behind them, the bunker remained hidden in the mountains, keeping its secrets, holding what remained of approximately $300 million in wealth that would change more lives in the years to come. Before them, the road stretched toward another second chance to give, another family to help, another life to transform. No platitudes about the universe rewarding bravery, no speeches about hope conquering fear, just action, just showing up, just doing the work that mattered. Rebecca Mitchell had once stood in snow with nothing but a frozen key and desperate hope. Now she carried that hope forward to others every single day, not because she'd found treasure in a mountain, but because she understood what Victor had tried to say in his letter, what he'd learned too late to use himself, but had trusted her to understand. Wealth only matters if it does something, if it creates something, if it helps someone. She'd been given a second chance when she had nothing left. Now she gave second chances to everyone who needed one. That was the work. That was what was real. That was what made the difference between existing and living. The road curved ahead through morning sunlight. Rebecca drove toward it without hesitation. Chloe beside her, another family waiting. The circle complete and beginning again simultaneously. Because second chances weren't transactions. They were gifts that multiplied when passed forward. And some gifts, the ones that mattered most, were never meant to be hoarded. They were meant to be shared until everyone who needed one had received it. That was the code Victor had encoded into 6 digits, not the numbers themselves, but what they represented. Family, love, the reasons we preserve anything worth preserving. And Rebecca Mitchell, who'd bought a bunker for $750 because she had nowhere else to go, had decoded that message perfectly, had proven that people given resources and opportunity sometimes chose generosity over fear, sometimes chose community over isolation, sometimes chose to build bridges instead of walls. Victor Bellamy had spent 33 years building walls, died alone behind them, but his final act had been to leave the door open, to give someone else the chance to make a different choice. Rebecca had walked through that door and kept walking, kept building, kept helping, kept proving that second chances, when given freely and received gratefully, could transform more than individual lives. They could transform entire communities, could ripple outward like stones thrown into still water, could create waves that reached shores the original giver never imagined. The Highlander crested a hill. Colorado Springs spread out below. Somewhere in that city, a mother sat in a car with 3 kids under 6, scared, desperate, wondering if this was where their story ended. Rebecca knew better. She knew this was where their story began, just like hers had begun 3 years ago in a frozen parking lot with a dying phone and an auction listing that looked like madness. But madness and hope sometimes looked identical. The difference was what you did with them, whether you let fear paralyze you or let desperation drive you forward, whether you accepted the end or fought for a beginning. Rebecca had fought, was still fighting, would keep fighting for every person who walked through Monroe Automotive's door looking for a second chance, for every family who moved into transitional housing looking for stability, for everyone who'd lost everything and needed someone to believe they could rebuild. That was the real inheritance Victor Bellamy had left, not $327 million in assets. That was just the tool. The real gift was the example, the proof that one person's choice could echo through time and touch lives the chooser would never meet. And Rebecca Mitchell, mechanic and mother and builder of second chances, carried that gift forward every single day. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but honestly, transparently, with the same desperate hope that had driven her to bid $750 on a bunker she'd never seen. That hope hadn't been misplaced, had been rewarded in ways she never imagined, and now she was passing it forward, making sure that hope, real, tangible, transformative hope, remained available to anyone desperate enough to need it and brave enough to accept it. The road ahead was clear, the morning bright, another family waiting, another chance to prove that wealth measured in dollars was temporary, but wealth measured in lives transformed lasted forever. Rebecca drove toward that future without fear, with Chloe beside her, with a vault full of resources behind her, and with the absolute certainty that this work, this purpose, this daily choice to help, instead of hoard, was what she'd been meant to find all along. Not treasure, not security, not escape from poverty, but purpose. the kind of purpose that made poverty and wealth equally irrelevant compared to the work itself. That was Victor's final lesson, the one he'd learned too late to apply to his own life, but had encoded into every aspect of Winter Vault for someone else to discover. And Rebecca Mitchell had discovered it, had lived it, was teaching it to Chloe and Gary and Kenneth and everyone else whose lives she touched. Some legacies were measured in buildings or money or achievements, but the legacies that mattered, the ones that actually changed the world, were measured in people helped, lives transformed, second chances given and received and multiplied into third and fourth and infinite chances for anyone who needed them. That was the vault's real treasure, not what was locked inside it, but what it enabled, what it made possible, what it proved about human nature when fear was stripped away and generosity given free rein. Rebecca Mitchell drove toward Colorado Springs with that knowledge warming her more thoroughly than the Highlander's heater ever could, drove toward another beginning, another transformation, another proof that the world could be better than Victor Bellamy had believed it was. All it took was one person brave enough to try, one person desperate enough to bet everything on hope, one person willing to prove that second chances, when given freely, created something more valuable than all the gold in all the vaults, in all the mountains in the world. They created possibility, and possibility, once unleashed, was the most powerful force in existence.